The complaint form was 17 pages long. Jisoo had filled out 16 of them. She sat cross-legged on the floor of Docking Bay 4, back against the cold hull of her ship, the Heian, a battered Condra-class freighter that smelled permanently of burnt coolant and the cinnamon crackers she stress-ate on long hauls. The bay hummed around her. Somewhere above, the Galactic Cooperative's orbital station groaned in its slow rotation, a sound like an old building settling into sleep. Page 17 asked her to describe, in no more than 200 words, why she believed the Council's Resolution 7 Gamma, formally titled The Prohibition of Human Combat Engagement Across All Recognized Theaters of Conflict, had directly impacted her livelihood. She stared at the blank field for a long time. Because I'm good at this, she thought. Because I spent 11 years learning how to be good at this, and now a bunch of beings who've never bled in their lives decided I'm too dangerous to be useful. She wrote, "It has significantly affected my income. 17 pages. Submitted. Rejected within 4 minutes." The automated response cited insufficient detail in Section 9. Jisoo closed the terminal, leaned her head back against the hull, and listened to the station groan. She'd heard about the resolution 6 months ago, through Mac, a Thalori trader who communicated in patterns of bioluminescent color across his wide, flat torso and had a talent for bad news. He'd pulsed a deep amber, which meant something between unfortunate and I already knew this would happen, and then showed her the council broadcast on his handheld. The vote had been unanimous, 32 species, not a single dissent. The reasoning, as translated from the official cooperative script, was something like, humans exhibit an anomalous and disproportionate tendency toward tactical escalation in combat scenarios, frequently destabilizing conflict resolution processes and causing outcomes that exceed initial engagement parameters. In plain language, humans were too good at war, so they weren't allowed to do it anymore. Security contracts canceled, defense positions dissolved, mercenary licenses revoked. The entire infrastructure of human off-world military work dismantled in a single afternoon of voting. Jisoo had been mid-contract when it happened. She'd been guarding a shipment of processed Velkai ore for a Draxi mining consortium, 3 jumps from the cooperative's core systems, when the transmission came through and her employer terminated her agreement effective immediately, with apologies and a partial payment that didn't cover her fuel costs back. She'd drifted for a while after that, done cargo runs, eaten a lot of cinnamon crackers. And then she'd started thinking. The Heian's bay was quiet when she woke the next morning to the sound of something scraping against her hull. Jisoo was on her feet before she was fully awake, the old reflex kicking in, hand reaching for the spot where a sidearm would have been, before she remembered she'd locked everything in the weapons cabinet to comply with station regulations. She grabbed a torque wrench instead and moved to the airlock. Outside, clinging to the exterior of her ship with 4 of its 6 limbs, while the other 2 fumbled with something near her sensor array, was a Vethkin. She'd never actually seen one up close. They were rare in this part of the cooperative, insectoid, about her height, with a carapace that shifted color the way oil shifted on water. This one's carapace was a dull, patchy brown-green, which she'd later learn meant stress. It had compound eyes that caught the bay lights and fractured them into 100 small pieces of color, and it was, very clearly, trying to steal her secondary navigation transponder. "Hey," she said. The Vethkin froze. "That's my transponder." It looked at her. She looked at it. The wrench felt stupid in her hand, but she kept holding it. The Vethkin made a sound, a dry clicking, like a handful of small stones shaken in a cup, and then, in heavily accented cooperative standards, said, "I require this component." "Yeah, I can see that. That doesn't mean you can take it." More clicking. "I will return it." "When?" A pause. "When I no longer require it." Jisoo leaned against the airlock frame. The station groaned above them. She looked at the Vethkin's carapace, that dull, stressed brown, and then at what it was actually carrying. The transponder, yes, but also a small pack that had been tied to its thorax with what looked like torn insulation strips. The pack was leaking something pale and faintly luminescent. "What's in the pack?" she asked. The Vethkan's clicking changed quality, higher, faster. "Medical compound, for my clutch sibling. The vendor on level 7 will not sell to me without a valid station ID, and my station ID has been suspended pending investigation of an incident I did not cause. and my clutch sibling's condition worsens by approximately 4% per standard hour, so... Okay, Jisoo said. Okay, give me back the transponder and get inside. The Vethkan stared at her with its fractured eyes. I'm not going to hurt you, she said. I'm going to help you. But give me back my transponder first, because I just filed 17 pages of bureaucratic complaints, and I really can't afford to lose my nav array right now. The Vethkan's name, as close as Jisoo could approximate it in standard, sounded something like Shek Vel Inar, which it told her to shorten to Vel for convenience. Vel was a scout, had been a scout for the Vethkan Navigational Collective before the cooperative's recent trade disputes with the collective had frozen most of their members' station access. The incident Vel had mentioned, which had suspended its ID, was apparently a misunderstanding involving a restricted corridor, a malfunctioning door sensor, and a security officer who had interpreted Vel's defensive clicking as threatening. Vel explained all of this sitting in Jisoo's cargo hold while she looked at the leaking pack. The luminescent substance was chelik, a Vethkan restorative compound, and it was leaking because the container had cracked during whatever had happened in the restricted corridor. How much do you need for your sibling? She asked. 1 full application, approximately 2 standard units of compound. Vel's carapace had shifted to a slightly less distressed color, more olive now. The level 7 vendor has it, but without station ID, I have station ID. Vel went very still. You would purchase it. I'd need you to pay me back. I'm not exactly swimming in credits right now. She paused. Well, I could just buy it, but I'd need to know how serious your sibling is. A long pause. Vel's carapace rippled through several colors Jisoo couldn't read yet. The chelik deficiency, if untreated, causes neural crystallization in Vethkan physiology. It is painful and eventually fatal. My clutch sibling is young, 14 molts. Jisoo didn't know exactly how that translated to years, but something about the word young in any language landed the same way. Right, she said. Let's go to level 7. The level 7 vendor was a crawly with 3 eyes and the personality of a bureaucratic wall, and it took Jisoo 22 minutes, 2 calls to station administration, and a formal declaration of intent to purchase on behalf of a dependent party to acquire 1 container of chelik compound. She also accidentally started an argument with a Turak merchant about queue priority, which she won by virtue of simply not moving. Vel stood slightly behind her the whole time watching. You are very persistent, Vel said, afterward, as they walked back toward Docking Bay 4. I've been told, Jisoo said. The Turak was larger than you. Size isn't really the point in a queue argument. What is the point? She thought about it. Willingness to stand there longer than the other person. Vel's carapace flickered. She'd started to notice that quick flicker was something like amusement, though she wasn't certain. She filed it away. The chelik worked. Vel's clutch sibling, who was housed in a tiny rented compartment on level 3, barely big enough for 2 Vetkans to stand in, with a humidity system that was clearly jury-rigged from parts of 3 different environmental units, responded to the treatment within 6 hours. Jisoo knew because Vel came back to the Heian to report this, standing at the bottom of the boarding ramp with what she now recognized as a brighter carapace color, something in the blue-gold range. My sibling is recovering, Vel said. Good. Jisoo was halfway through recalibrating the sensor array, which Vel's earlier adventure had knocked slightly out of alignment. She had a scanner in one hand and a cup of very bad station coffee in the other. I owe you a debt, Vel said. You really don't. I do. In Vethkan custom, a life debt cannot be left unacknowledged. Jisoo set down the scanner. A life debt? I bought medicine. You intervened in a situation that would have led to my sibling's death. The mechanism of intervention is not relevant to the debt. Vel paused. I understand this concept may not translate directly to human cultural practice. We have the concept, we just argue about it more. Another carapace flicker. Definitely amusement. I have noted that humans argue about most things. Fair, she said, and picked the scanner back up. Vel didn't leave. It stood at the bottom of the ramp, and Jisoo kept working, and eventually, because silence with Vel had started to feel oddly comfortable, like working alone but not quite, she said, You can come up if you want. I could use a second pair of hands, or limbs, whatever works. They worked on the sensor array together for 3 hours. Vel was precise in a way that made Jisoo slightly jealous, fine motor control that came from having 6 limbs, probably, or just from being a species whose entire navigation culture was built on exact sensory calibration. Vel caught 2 alignment errors she'd missed and pointed them out without making her feel stupid about it, which she appreciated. They talked while they worked. Scattered, practical conversation at first. Hand me that connector, no, the smaller one. And then gradually wider things. Vel asked about the cooperative's new restrictions, and Jisoo found herself explaining the resolution more calmly than she had in months. Maybe because she was busy and couldn't afford to be bitter right now, or maybe because Vel listened without the particular brand of pity that other humans sometimes offered. You were a combat operative, Vel said, not a question. Security contractor, there's technically a difference. But you engaged in conflict directly. 11 years. She handed Vel a calibration tool. I was good at it. Not in a scary way, I hope. Just in a doing the job right way. Vel was quiet for a moment, working. Then, the council's reasoning is not entirely illogical. Humans do escalate conflicts. Jisoo expected to bristle at that. She didn't, quite. We escalate toward resolution. Other species will let a conflict drag on for decades because nobody wants to push hard enough to end it. Humans push. It ends messier, but it ends. And the casualties in that resolution? Are fewer than 20 years of grinding attrition, she sighed. Probably. The data's complicated. I'm not saying we're always right. Vel's carapace shifted, something thoughtful in the color. You disagree with the resolution, but acknowledge the argument behind it. I think it's a blunt solution to a complicated problem. She tightened a connector. But here I am anyway. Here she was anyway. She'd been saying that a lot lately, internally. Here I am anyway. She'd gone through the anger about the resolution months ago, the furious, restless weeks after the contract terminated, when she'd sent 4 increasingly unhinged messages to the cooperative's human liaison office and gotten 4 increasingly diplomatic non-answers back. Then the depression, quieter, sitting in the Heian on long jumps eating crackers and not sleeping well. Now she was somewhere on the other side of both of those things. Not fine exactly, but functional. And then, on the 14th day after the Chelik incident, she'd started counting without meaning to. Vel knocked on the Heian's airlock again and said, I think I have found something you should hear. Vel had contacts in the cooperative's administrative network, which made sense for a scout. Vel navigated bureaucracy the way Jisoo had once navigated firefights, finding the paths others missed. Through those contacts, Vel had learned about a new cooperative initiative, the Conflict Mediation and Resolution Facilitation Program, or CMRFP, which was a name that clearly had been designed by committee. The CMRFP was looking for operatives to work as facilitators in active conflict zones, not combatants, officially. The role had been engineered very carefully to comply with Resolution 7 Gamma's language, which prohibited humans from combat engagement but said nothing about human presence in conflict zones in an advisory, logistical, or, and this was the part that made Jisoo read the brief 3 times, de-escalation capacity. This is loophole work, she said. Yes, Vel said. Someone human thought of this. The proposal's architect is a Dr. Min Soo-hyun, Human Liaison Office, posted to Cooperative Central 3 years ago. A pause. She appears to have submitted a very detailed 17-page proposal. Jisoo burst out laughing for the first time in months. It surprised her. It seemed to surprise Vel, too. The carapace went briefly pale before settling back. Humans respond to barriers by finding the edges of them, Jisoo said, mostly to herself. We can't fight, fine. But you didn't say we couldn't be there. You didn't say we couldn't advise. You didn't say we couldn't look at your conflict and say, here's what's going to happen if you keep doing this, and actually be right about it because we've seen it before. The CMRFP is currently recruiting, Vel said. Operatives with conflict zone experience. Ships with valid registration. There is a station briefing in 2 days. She looked at Vel. You looked this up for me. Vel's carapace did something complex. Several colors moving through it in sequence, like weather across a landscape. You helped my sibling. I help you. The debt has a practical shape. I told you it wasn't a debt. And I noted that you argue about most things. The briefing was held in one of the station's mid-level conference rooms, the kind with chairs designed for 3 different body types, and none of them comfortable for any of them. Jisoo arrived early, which was a habit, and spent 10 minutes studying the other attendees as they filtered in. 4 other humans, all with the particular posture of people who had recently lost a professional identity and were trying not to show how much it bothered them. A pair of Draxi contractors in full environmental suits. 2 Vethkan navigators, which made Jisoo notice Vel at the back of the room before she'd consciously registered the familiar blue-gold carapace. Vel had come. Vel caught her looking, and the carapace flickered. Jisoo found a seat near the aisle and told herself it didn't matter where Vel was sitting. The briefing was run by a cooperative official named something unpronounceable, introduced as Facilitator Orvan, who was a Garesi, tall, copper-skinned in the way of their kind, with a voice like 2 cellos playing slightly different notes simultaneously. Orvan explained the CMRFP in careful language, hitting every word that legally distinguished facilitation from combat, and Jisoo watched the other humans in the room clock the same loophole she had at roughly the same time, a ripple of something like hope moving through their expressions. After, she found herself standing with Vel near the exit. "Are you applying?" she asked. "The collective has partnered with the CMRFP for navigational support," Vel said. "I would be assigned to a facilitation team, as a navigator. So we'd be working together. Potentially." The carapace was doing that weather system thing again, colors moving through it. "Is that acceptable?" She thought about 17 pages of complaint forms, about the Turak in the queue, about 3 hours calibrating sensors in comfortable silence. "Yeah," she said. "That's acceptable." They were assigned the Heian as the team's primary transport, which Jisoo appreciated even if it meant she had to clean out approximately 40 kilos of cargo junk from the hold to make room for facilitation equipment. Vel helped. Vel was efficient at cleaning in the same unsettling way Vel was efficient at everything, and had opinions about organizational systems that Jisoo found both irritating and genuinely useful. "The emergency kits should be at the front of the hold," Vel said, rearranging things with 4 limbs simultaneously. "Access priority." "I know where my own emergency kits go," Jisoo said. "You had them behind the welding equipment." "I know where they were. I'm saying I know where they go." A pause. "Do you?" "Put them at the front." Their first assignment was a disputed mineral claim in the Voss Belt. 3 jumps out. 2 Kralik factions arguing over extraction rights to a nickel-iron asteroid that both of them needed and neither of them would share. Standard resource conflict, Orvan had told them. Should be straightforward. It was not straightforward. The Kralik, Jisoo discovered, communicated grievances through a process of formal ritual complaint that had to be performed in sequence, with each side waiting for the other to finish a full complaint cycle before responding. This process took approximately 6 hours per exchange. There were 47 unresolved exchanges queued up. She did the math on the flight back on the first day, sitting in the cockpit with Vel beside her at the navigation panel, both of them tired in a comfortable, shared way. 282 hours, she said, at minimum. "If no new complaints are added," Vel said. "Which they will be. Almost certainly." Jisoo ate a cinnamon cracker and thought about it. "Okay, so we don't work within the complaint system. We work around it. The CMR-FP protocol specifies we work within established cultural frameworks. The protocol specifies we respect established cultural frameworks. It doesn't say we can't introduce a new framework alongside." She spun her chair to face Vel. "What do the Kralik do when they're not disputing?" Vel looked at her. "They mine." "Right, so they both want the asteroid. Both of them need what's in it. The complaint system is the form, but underneath the form, the actual problem is just," she gestured with the cracker, "allocation. If we could get them talking about allocation instead of grievances, through their language, their ritual structure, but redirecting the topic, you're suggesting we embed a new process within the formal complaint cycle." "I'm suggesting we give them something productive to argue about." Vel was quiet for a moment. The navigation panel pinged softly. The stars through the cockpit window were very still. "That is," Vel said carefully, "a human solution." "Is that a problem?" The carapace went blue-gold. "No, it is an observation." They went back the next day with a proposal. The Kralik took 4 hours to formally acknowledge receiving it, which was apparently rapid by their standards. Within 3 days, they were in allocation talks. Within 10, they had a working agreement. Orvan's response, transmitted to the Heian as they jumped back toward the station, was a single line. Facilitation completed in advance of projected timeline. Method noted for review. Vel read it aloud. Jisoo heard the careful neutrality in the transmission and grinned at the cockpit window. Noted for review, she said. That's cooperative for, we don't know what you did, but we can't say it was wrong. Vel made the clicking sound. Definitely amusement. The second and third assignments were harder. The fourth nearly got them killed, not in any way that violated the resolution, there was no combat, but rather because the conflict zone in question was on a geologically unstable moon, and a seismic event during the facilitation session brought down part of the structure they were meeting in, and Jisoo spent 40 minutes pulling Vel free from rubble, while the Thalori factions they'd been meeting with stood outside arguing about whose fault the building's structural maintenance was. Vel had a cracked carapace plate along the left thorax. It wasn't life-threatening, Jisoo asked 3 times to confirm, but it was painful, and it would take several weeks to repair naturally, and Vel moved more carefully for a long time after. On the jump back, Vel said, "You sustained injury." Jisoo looked at the bandage on her forearm, where falling debris had caught her. Scratch. It required medical attention. It required a bandage. Different category. Vel was quiet. Then, "You acted quickly, in the building." "Seismic events don't negotiate," she said. "Only time I'm allowed to act without a facilitation framework." It came out more wry than she intended. Vel's carapace shifted to something she hadn't seen before. A deep, warm amber that wasn't the distress amber from the first day. Something different. Something she didn't have a word for yet. "You don't resent it," Vel said. "The restriction." She thought about that for a long time, watching the jump space fold around them. That strange blue-white nothing that existed between real places. "I resented it," she said. "I still have days, but—" She stopped. Started again. "I was good at fighting. I'm finding out I'm good at this too. It's the same thing, underneath. Reading a situation. Knowing what force to apply and when. Knowing when not to." She turned to look at Vel. "Maybe the Council wasn't wrong that humans shouldn't be fighting every war. Maybe we should have figured that out ourselves." The amber on Vel's carapace deepened. "But we didn't get to choose," she said quietly. "That part still bothers me." "Yes," Vel said. "I think it should." There was a night on the station, between the 5th and 6th assignments, during a 10-day layover while the Heian got its port stabilizers replaced, when Jisoo couldn't sleep. She ended up in the small observation bay on level 9, the one with the scratched viewport that looked out on the permanent star scatter of the inner cooperative systems, and sat on the floor because the bench was bolted at the wrong height for humans. She heard Vel before she saw Vel, the soft, dry clicking of movement, different in quality from Vel's usual purposeful stride, slower and restless. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Vetkins don't sleep in the way you mean," Vel said, settling beside her on the floor without being asked. "But there is a rest state that I am not achieving." "Worrying?" "Processing." A pause. "The next assignment is complex." She nodded. The 6th assignment was a 4-faction territorial dispute on a colony world, the kind of thing that had already consumed 2 cooperative mediators and a Thalori diplomatic team before it got handed to the CMRFP. To her. "We'll figure it out," she said. "You don't know that." "No, but I found that assuming otherwise doesn't help." She looked at the scratched viewport, at the stars beyond it. "My grandmother had this thing," she said. "A Korean proverb maybe, or maybe she made it up, I was never sure. The stone doesn't ask if it's heavy enough before it holds up the bridge." Vel was quiet. Then, "The stone doesn't know it's holding up the bridge." "Maybe, or maybe it does and it just," she shrugged, "does it anyway." The observation bay was very still. The station groaned, that settling building sound. The stars didn't move, of course, but they seemed to, the way they always seem to when you watch them long enough. Vel's carapace was the deep amber again. Jisoo had started to understand it now, or thought she had. It wasn't distress. It was something more like the feeling of standing at the edge of a high place. Not fear exactly, the awareness of height. "I am glad," Vel said carefully, "that you argued with the Turok in the queue." Jisoo turned to look at Vel. "If you had not," Vel continued, I might have found a different means to obtain the Chelik, and we would not have. The clicking changed quality. Something in it Jisoo couldn't read yet, a new frequency. I am glad of this work, and of the person I do it with. Jisoo was quiet for a moment. She was aware of the few centimeters between them on the floor, the scratch of the viewport surface reflecting both of them in distorted, doubled shapes. Vel, she said, I don't know much about how Vetcons— I know you don't, Vel said. I also know that I have explained Vethkan customs when relevant to our work, and I have not explained this one because it is— A pause. The clicking was definitely nervous now, faster. Because this one is not about work. Jisoo looked at Vel's compound eyes, all those fractured lights. Okay, she said, so explain it anyway. Vel explained it in pieces, over 3 conversations across as many days, which Jisoo respected because some things shouldn't be rushed, and because it gave her time to think about her own side of it, which she was less articulate about but tried. Vethkan partnership bonds were not like human relationships in their structure, but they were like them in the part that mattered, the choosing, the specific choosing of one person out of all the available people, based on the entirely irrational accumulation of evidence that this particular one made the world function better with them in it. Jisoo's evidence was 3 hours on a sensor array, a Q argument, a seismic event, 40 minutes of rubble, jump space conversations, a proverb she wasn't sure her grandmother had actually said, the specific quality of silence that existed in the cockpit of the Heian when both of them were working and not talking, and it was somehow the least lonely she'd felt in years. She told Vel this, not all of it at once, not eloquently, standing in the Heian's cargo hold while they restocked for the 6th assignment, and she kept picking up supply containers and putting them down without loading them. Vel's carapace went a color she'd never seen before, not in any of the sequences or shifts she'd cataloged over the months. Something like gold, but warmer, more interior than reflected, like the color was coming from inside the carapace rather than just sitting on its surface. She asked what it meant. I don't have a standard word, Vel said. Give me the Vethkan one. Chelikshen. The clicking of it was soft. The compound that repairs, applied to more than biology. Jisoo stood in her own cargo hold with a supply container in her hands, and felt something she also didn't have a precise word for. Not the grand sweep of it she might have imagined feeling once, in a younger and more dramatic version of herself, but something quieter and more durable, like a correctly calibrated sensor array, like a bridge with the right stone in it. Okay, she said. That works. The 6th assignment took 19 days and nearly failed 3 times. The 3rd near failure was because Jisoo made a cultural error with the Vethkan faction. She had not known, and Vel had not thought to tell her, that direct eye contact with a Vethkan elder during a dispute session was considered a challenge, and the session had to be suspended for half a day while the breach was formally acknowledged. She apologized to the elder. She did it correctly, Vel coached her through it, and the session resumed. The elder, at the end, addressed a comment directly to Vel and Vethkan, a clicking sequence that took almost a minute. She asked Vel what it said. That your ignorance was genuine and your correction was genuine, Vel said, and that a human who acknowledges error in the correct form is rarer than a human who avoids error and more trustworthy. Jisoo thought about that for a long time on the jump home. The 4 factions reached an agreement, a preliminary one, fragile in the way that early agreements always were, needing the careful, continued work of people willing to come back and reinforce it. Orvan's message this time was longer. Facilitation successful. Method under formal review. Continued assignment recommended. Jisoo read it standing in the cockpit with Vel beside her, and felt the particular satisfaction of a thing that had been genuinely hard being genuinely done. Noted for review, she said again. Formal review this time, Vel said. It is a step. She leaned back in the pilot's chair. The Heian hummed around them, the coolant smell and the undertone of cinnamon, the port stabilizers newly replaced and running smooth. You know what I think? She said. I think the council banned humans from war because we were too willing to fight. I think they were right that it caused problems. I think they were wrong that the answer was just exclusion. She looked at the stars. The answer was this, using the same thing, just aimed differently, pushed against a different wall. Vel was quiet for a moment. Resolution 7 Gamma may be revised before its 5-year review period. Because of the CMRFP data. Because of specific CMRFP data. Certain methods are being studied. She smiled at the viewport. Is that cooperative for a human found the edge of the rule and proved it was the wrong rule? It is cooperative for the evidence is compelling, and we are very carefully considering it. Same thing. Almost, Vel said, and the carapace was gold all the way through, warm and interior, Chelik Shen, and the stars were very still outside the scratched viewport of the Heian. And Jisoo, formerly of 11 years in security contracts, now the stone under a bridge she hadn't planned to build, ate the last of her cinnamon crackers and thought that here she was anyway, and for once that felt exactly right.